Hello there everybody, it's Dr. Mike Talbot of UK Mediation, and we're here with our Workplace Mediation online showcase. It's recorded on 24th of April 2020 and we were trying to do it live and had a few hiccups with YouTube. Apparently YouTube's got a new piece of software in there in the absence of human reviewers during COVID-19. They've got an algorithm that's looking for copyright material, and they took our material down. It is copyright material, but the copyright belongs to us. But we didn't get a chance to have that debate with YouTube before we had to abandon the live event. Sorry about that, everybody. And here we are with a not live event, all about workplace mediation. I'm Dr. Mike Talbot. I'm a psychotherapist originally, and I started UK Mediation 21 years ago. And we do interpersonal dispute mediation. We do all kinds of dispute mediation, really. So today we're concentrating just on a fallout between two colleagues and looking at how workplace mediation can be brought into action for workplace disputes, grievance type issues, how the 7-stage mediation model can be applied to stuff like this, and how we would use it in the workplace. So looking at the practicalities of actually bringing mediation into your workplace. And then a question and answer session, and then we'll be looking at, at the end we'll just be doing some discussion points. When we tried to do the live event, we had some questions which I'll bring forwards. First of all, let's meet Sally and Heather without further ado. So this is these two work colleagues, and we're going to see a bit of conflict between these two guys, how it starts, have a little sort of think about that, and then we'll look at the practicalities and the theory and practice of applying workplace mediation to this very dispute. So here we go with Sally and Heather and their conflict.
Sally and Heather work together in the accounts department of Connors Plumbing Supplies. Heather has been in her role for some years, while Sally has only recently joined the department following a reshuffle. There is some bad feeling from Heather over Sally's appointment, with Heather claiming that Sally only got the job because of her friendship with James, the departmental manager. Sally and James had worked together over a number of years before the current reshuffle. Sally claims in return that Heather over-scrutinises her work and her timekeeping and is cold and unfriendly with her. The two have quite different approaches to work, and this has begun to cause some tension. James has no issue with the two of them getting the job done, but has needed to speak to them separately about the importance of getting on together. They continue to rub each other up the wrong way, and there is often an atmosphere in the office. It is Tuesday morning, a few days before the deadline for an important report to be completed. Sally is on the phone to her friend.
Hi Liz, yeah, it's nice to talk to you. Yeah? I was just ringing to find out what time we're going to meet for the theatre on Tuesday. Yeah. We go for about 1:30. Perfect. Yeah, it'd be fantastic to see you then. Oh, actually, do you want to go for a coffee first? That would be great.
Oh, for God's sake, it's not like it's even dinner time or anything.
Yeah, 1:30, Liz. Yeah, that'll be absolutely fine. Okay. All right. Bye. What are you doing at the weekend?
Nothing special.
Oh, we're going out with Phil. It's his birthday. Do you know Phil from sales?
Yeah.
It's his 50th. Would you like to come along?
No, it's all right. It's not really my kind of thing.
Oh, it's his 50. You should really enjoy yourself. Come on, you're fantastic time if you come.
Look, I said no, I don't want to go. We've got this important report to get finished. Perhaps we should be getting on with that instead of organising our social life.
Well, oh, has she had a second baby yet? Oh, that's lovely. She had a little boy. What's she called him? Oh, that's really nice. Hold on a minute.
Sorry to interrupt. How's your part of the report going?
Yeah, getting it done.
Do you think you'll have it done by tonight? Only I've got mine finished and I need to work yours into it.
By tomorrow. Yes, hi Ruth. Sorry for the interruption.
Sorry, Sally, I've not finished.
Sorry Ruth, I'll have to ring you back.
You've been on the phone for nearly 20 minutes. You could be doing your report then.
I'm
Before
on the
that, you
phone
had a break.
to Ruth from Albright.
Well, it doesn't sound like it. You was on for at least 20 minutes and before that having a break.
Is that right? That's the crux of it, isn't it? are constantly monitoring when I go for my break. You think you're in charge, well you're not. You're always evaluating what I'm doing and timing when I have my breaks. I've had enough of it.
No, I don't. You're just being bloody childish now. For God's sake, can you just get your part of the work done? I've had enough of this. You're an absolute nightmare. I'm going to have to speak to James.
Heather goes to see James to complain about what she sees as Sally's lack of commitment to the job, distracting behaviour and disregard for important deadlines. James spends some time with Heather and then asks to speak to Sally, who tells James that she is upset about aspects of Heather's manner towards her. Later that morning, James gets them together for a joint conversation, partly about the day's events, but also about the more long-standing conflict between the two of them. James has previously spoken to the two of them about their working relationship and feels that he has done all he can. He proposes that they try mediation to build a better understanding of each other. An external mediator is brought in. He starts by seeing the two colleagues separately with the intention of getting them together later on.
Well, there we are. There's Sally and Heather, best of friends. So, typical sort of workplace dispute. There's a bit of a clash going on in working styles. There's been some restructuring, etc., etc. So let's have a think about what's going on with Sally and Heather. There's clearly some fallout from the rearrangement of roles, where Sally's gone into a department and the incumbent there, Heather, who's been running the department, feels as if a job has been made for her. She's got some things to say about that. And Sally feels very unwelcomed, rather bossed about, rather over-scrutinised, and has this perception of unfair treatment, which is not unusual in these kind of settings. So Heather's routine's been disrupted. She's not too happy about the situation, and she's consequently, Sally feels as if she's been treated unfairly. Clearly a clash of styles. Sally has this rather more sociable, sort of a good balance of the social and the official within her working style, whereas Heather, it's like, let's get the job done. So a bit of a clash going on there. Sally values the relationships she's building up with clients and suppliers. Heather sees that as something that should be minimised, and they should rather get on with hitting deadlines. Consequently, there's a communication breakdown between the two of them, and they've fallen out to the point of shouting, a lot of finger pointing, stamping around, slamming the file down on the counter, and storming off to go and see the manager. So there we have the manager's involvement, and of course a lot of these things can either be sorted out between individuals if they're able to do that, and it sounds like these guys have maybe gone a little bit beyond that point, and if they can't do that, they'll go to the manager and see if the manager can help out. So what's the manager's input here? Well, as far as the manager is concerned in this situation, he's had a few chats with the two parties. He's spoken to them about the need for them to get on, and he has no particular performance or capability issues. So as far as the manager is concerned, they're doing the job, they're capable of the job, and it's more about their conduct. And I think this is the start to think about now, mediation coming over the horizon. We're thinking about really the selection criteria of these kinds of situations for workplace mediation. So if it was a capability issue, or there's an unmet training need, or there's something about a performance, then perhaps that needs to be dealt with separately from any issues to do with conduct or the relationship. So we don't want to mix up conduct and capability. So in this case, there's no particular concern about that. He has spoken to them both. So again, in the normal practice of a workplace, you don't want people going straight to mediators. So you want to be sure that the manager's had made every reasonable effort, possibly with support from HR colleagues, to try and resolve things between parties. And he might have had a facilitated conversation. It sounds like he did have a go at that, to try and facilitate some kind of a resolution meeting between these two guys. Clearly it's not worked, or we wouldn't be where we were. But that facilitated conversation is a very valuable step along the way, so that if that fails, then you know that perhaps there's a need for perhaps an external mediator, or some kind of a rather more weighty intervention. But the facilitated conversation first, run by the manager, he decides it needs this extra layer, get an external mediator in, to have this extra layer of independence and impartiality. So this is the way it goes fairly typically, where there is a dispute between colleagues down the lines of their interpersonal working relationship, and this is how we might end up with bringing in an external mediator. So far so good, and here we go, bringing in the external mediator. let's have a think about a model. I'm going to put up quite a bit of detail about the model, but we're just going to look at the headlines of the 7-stage mediation model, really. So what we're going to do as an external mediator is to attend to this situation. There'll be a brief referral process. We would be getting a mediator in on the basis of a referral, possibly by the manager here or possibly by the HR department, and looking at, first of all, having an initial contact with one of the parties. So this involves speaking privately, separately, with the first of the two parties. It doesn't matter who goes first, but the important thing about this is to allow some offloading, to try and deduce what this person's interests are. So what are their needs? And we could identify differently for Sally and for Heather what might be their particular needs, and then to get their agreement to take it forwards this way. There's probably a bit more to say about interests, but in regard to what we're seeing there in the office, clearly one of Heather's interests is to have a quiet working environment and not to mix up the social with the more dedicated worky time. Whereas from Sally's point of view, one of her interests is to have a bit more of that social time to build relationships with clients and to be allowed to do that, and also to be welcomed into and encouraged into the role in this new department. So there's two sets of interests there, which are clearly in competition, and this is what we're trying to look at. Firstly, when we meet with party one, and in a little while when we meet with party two. So we're going to see a clip now of the first part of the individual meeting with Heather, who we've chosen to go first.
Yeah, but generally speaking, the normal rules of your company apply.
Oh, okay. So
whatever would be required of your company whilst you're here or at your office or in the canteen or in the kitchen, it's the same as when you're in mediation.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'm happy
All
to
right.
sign. Yeah, I'm happy to sign that.
Thanks very much. So that's really the only formal thing I do. So I put that away, Heather, and I'll say start anywhere and tell me what goes on.
Well, I don't know where to start. I find this quite difficult, to be honest.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I've worked for this company for 10 years, longer than my manager and certainly longer than Sally's been there. I never had any issues, I go to work, I've always got my job and all the work done on time, handed in, never any problems. And Sally, I think it was about 6 months ago, the company had a restructure. They decided they was going to outsource the marketing department, which is where Sally worked. They created a sales department, so a couple of the people that was in marketing went over to sales. And then all of a sudden there was a new role as well created in accounts, which, I don't think was needed. I've been doing all the work on my own, perfectly fine.
So there we are with the first part of the conversation with Heather. So she's having a bit of a chat with the mediator, and she has quite a lot to say, so I've sort of faded that down. And then towards the end of that meeting with Heather, we see how that gets concluded when we start to think about moving on then to see the second party. So let's just have a look at how the session concludes with Heather.
Well, I suppose the last thing is the eating, and not knowing how I feel about hearing people eat. Not to do it at the desk, or if she's eating an orange, I can't hear that as much, but she seems to purposely, it's crisps and apples all the time, the loudest foods she can find, and she just seems to smirk knowing that she's doing it, and I just feel that it's just totally disrespectful.
You're asking for some consideration for that as well, really.
Instead of just kind of brushing over it and laughing about it and making fun of me about it.
Okay, sure. All right. So the possibility is for the two of you to come back this afternoon and to have a conversation together with me here. Does that sound like it's a feasible prospect for you?
I don't know, to be honest.
What concerns might you have about that?
Well, just quite often she just totally lies about her aspect. She tries to make out that she's always really polite and that, and people haven't always seen the nasty side with some of the comments and the mimicking, and I love my job and where I work and I don't want to leave. But this past 6 months, it's got to the point where that if it's not sorted out and she doesn't go, then I'm going to have to go. I just can't take it. So I'm willing to give anything a go, to be honest.
Okay, great. Well, that's all we can ask for, really, you know, is to give it a go. And, you know, I think it's really helpful that you've got some ideas at the front of your mind about what you would ask Sally to do differently. And my job later on is to remain impartial, really. I'm not making a judgment about who's right or wrong. You've mentioned, you know, previously attempts to sort this out have failed, possibly because, you know, that lack of impartiality. But my job is to try and remain impartial. I'm not here to say who's to blame or who's at fault or what anybody should do. I'm not going to direct people and say, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And we're very much looking at the future about what you can do from this point onwards. You'll probably need to talk about how you got to this point, I imagine. And my focus will more be on, you know, what can change from now on. So to that end, you know, my job is to help you have the conversation you need to have, to give you equal time to speak and equal encouragement to respond when you come back later on. And also to keep your conversation on track. And if at the end you agree to do some things differently and we put those down in an action plan or some kind of summary, is to help you do that as well.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more positive than previous. I mean, it's nice actually to have someone that is impartial listen to this, because you know, she's, as I say, she has everyone wrapped round her finger nearly at the office, and
you know, and it is getting to you. You've shown me today, you know, you're very upset by this. You're very frustrated. You're annoyed about the situation. You're fed up with what's going on, and you know, you're expressing that very clearly. And I'd encourage you to do that later on as well. In my view, you know, I think there's potential there to have a good conversation. It's not going to be necessarily cosy, but that's all right. It sounds like it's overdue.
It's not going to be
you know,
easy.
you're saying this is long overdue, and but hopefully we might be able to make something different happen today.
Well, at least this time she's not got the manager just being there on her side, who's the one that always has the meetings. So
all right, okay. Well, if you're happy to end there, then I'll see you again later on.
okay, that's great. Thanks, Mike.
So there we have Heather, who's been designated party one in this dispute, meeting with the mediator, who happens to be me, and hearing about how it might progress with the mediation. So hopefully the things you might notice from there in the stage one are allowing Heather a good deal of offloading, trying to deduce her interest. So the mediator is attempting to try and reframe what Heather's saying away from all the allegations and complaints and into a different place, really, where we're thinking about, okay, you need this, you need that, what you need from your colleague is this, what you wish would happen is that. So very much trying to move things into the future and away from the past, away from allegations and blame-focused statements, and rather into thinking about responsibility to make the situation better, and away from the very positional things like you can't eat at the desk, you've got to get your head down and do the work, away from those kinds of things, which are not generally very constructive in terms of a win-win outcome in mediation. And we're trying to get away from those and into a place where we're looking at people's interests. So we're looking at the underlying needs and concerns, and the mediator is thinking about how can we get these two guys together, bearing in mind what they tell us in private, have a negotiation so that they can both get their interests satisfied simultaneously. But we haven't met with Sally yet, so the next bit would be stage two, which would be the initial contact with party two. We're going to do pretty well the same job with her, so we're just going to show a short bit of this. And we'll be looking at, again, getting her trust and trying to exercise impartiality, which is tricky because if Sally knows she's going second, then clearly she'll be a little bit on the back foot. The mediator has to work double hard to maintain privacy and not disclose things that Heather has said to him in private. So we're starting with a blank sheet, really. We're going to meet Sally. This is the stage two of the model. And let's see what Sally's got to say.
And there she is calling me names again, you know, and she does this often. She will claim that she isn't doing. She says that it's all about favouritism and that James only listens to me, but she's not actually giving a true picture of what she's doing and what she's saying and how difficult she's being about it. She doesn't want me there. Yeah. So it's a very, you can imagine the environment's very, you feel like you're on tenterhooks all the time. I feel very uncomfortable. And I said the reason I suppose you've come in is because it sort of came to a head the other week. We were in the kitchen I'd gone in to make a cup of tea and I was on the phone to an accountant from a company. And while I was on the phone, she came in and she was trying to get my attention. So in the end, I pulled the phone away from my head and she saying, when's the report? You know, when's the report going to be done? What a bloody report. She goes on and on about this. If it's done 10 times a day, she's asked for that flaming report. I told her it would be done the next day, and I said that again and said, can you leave it for now? Because I was on the phone. But she wouldn't, and she sort of went on again. And in she just lay off, leave it. And she went mad. And she began calling me names. She called me a nightmare and that I was bloody childish. Well, to be honest, she's bloody childish.
Okay. So it sounds like it goes back to the time that you've come into the department from your
Yes.
point of view, you know, right back then.
Yes.
You know, you didn't feel particularly welcomed
Not
in,
at
and you
all
didn't feel
welcome.
as if.
I was welcomed, obviously, by the manager and felt that I was looking forward to the role.
Sure. Okay. And as though, you know, you weren't allowed to sort of prove yourself and show that you could actually do the job.
That's, yeah.
You felt as if Heather was sort of not allowing you that space, or wasn't really sort of moving over so that you could find your place.
Most definitely. She made it very clear from the first moment that she didn't want me there.
Yeah. Okay. And you're frustrated about that, and
Very frustrated.
you know, it's been difficult right up until this point, where now, by the sound of it, your sort of working style clashes with your colleagues.
It does. I mean, she even comments about how many tea breaks I go for. You know, it's and she feels that she can determine when I go for break, how I produce my work, what the content should be.
Okay,
You know, it's
and
irksome.
that doesn't suit you. You know,
No.
that's annoying to you, because
Yeah.
you want to choose when you have your breaks. You want to choose to spend time talking to clients and building those relationships, as you put it.
Yeah.
You know, and be able to decide how to schedule your own working day, really.
Yeah, because she can be.
So there we have the individual meeting with Sally. So the mediator has now met the two parties separately. And what we can see is the mediator's deducing the interest, looking at, in the case of Sally, you know, that extra job of really trying to gain her trust, maintain his impartiality and maintain privacy. So it looks to us like it should be a case that can progress into mediation. It's a question we will be asking ourselves when we move into the stage 3 about, is this the best way forward? Sometimes in disputes we choose not to bring people together. Often in other sorts of disputes, like neighbourhood disputes within families, it's too incendiary. It wouldn't be a sensible management decision to bring people together. And also in workplace disputes, if people are so angry that they're not able to express themselves, or there's a very high degree of verbal aggression between the parties, we might initially have them separately and use a shuttle process to actually move to and fro between the two parties. If that's not the case, then we're able to bring the two people together, as we think we probably can do with Sally and Heather. We select the time and place, and then we're moving into a face-to-face session. So the face-to-face session, what that involves is the mediator opening the session with a welcome and some introductions and getting some rules in place. You'll see the two rules that we really need to have in this kind of case is really try and take it in turns to speak and try and avoid any language that's personally abusive, and certainly any name calling. Then what we do is give people a bit of time to speak, summarise each party's individual view, and think about the agenda of issues that needs to be resolved in this way. So that's what we do in the first part of stage 4. Let's have a quick look at that and see what happens with Sally and Heather. Some interesting body language at the start of this clip, I think you'll agree.
So if you're okay with that, then what I would suggest is, if I can hear from you both individually, if I could have one of you start to give you some uninterrupted time to talk about what's on your mind as you arrive this afternoon, and especially to talk about what you think needs to be discussed and what you want to get out of this, really. So if one of you would like to begin.
I would. Normally Sally's the one with everything to say, but
Pause you a
I think
second.
I'll-
So Sally, are you okay if Heather goes first?
Why not?
You're all right with that, yeah? Okay, so Heather, we'll hear from you first. So it's to have some uninterrupted time to talk to me about what's on your mind, and especially what you'd like to get out of this. And while Heather's talking, Sally, if you could please listen to what she's got to say and try and refrain from interrupting. And when it's your turn, I'll make sure Heather does the same for you. Okay? So Heather.
Well, obviously, as I said this morning, I'm just finding it impossible to work with Sally. Absolutely impossible. She came into the department 6 months ago. And since then, it's just got worse and worse. She is constantly on the phone, not just to clients, to friends as well, people in other departments. She's extremely loud and brash when she's on the phone as well, you know, organising a social life. It's hard to concentrate, and it's unprofessional as well, being like that with clients.
So there's Heather's uninterrupted time, and the mediator summarises what Heather's got to say now, and then we move into hearing Sally's uninterrupted time.
So, Sally, thank you very much for your patience while we heard from Heather. And like I say, I'll ask Heather to be patient when we hear from you in a second. So just before we do that, Heather, from your point of view, you know, you want to be able to work without interruption. You want to have little disturbance. That's the way you work. There's a couple of things that need to be talked about with regard to eating at the desk, with regard to how Sally structures her working day in a manner that suits your working day. You want to be able to speak to Sally, get hold of her. You want to be able to get hold of pieces of work that might be on her desk, which from, you know, you describe as not as orderly as you would like it to be, or not as orderly as you would have your own workspace. And some stuff about, you know, how the two of you generally sort of relate in the office, how much chat there is, how much social contact there is, and how much work time there is.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's as though I feel as though she's doing it on purpose. Like with the eating, I said, you know, she knows I can't stand it. Yet when she gets a pack of crisps out, she puts one in her mouth, looks over with a big smirk on her face. You know, as though she's doing it on purpose.
So to have an understanding about how that affects you or impacts
she
on you.
doesn't seem to think it's a condition. She just shrugs it off.
Okay.
You know, it's just not showing me any respect whatsoever.
Something else we could be talking about this afternoon, really. Okay.
I mean, I've tried. I've tried. I tried to help her. She's never done accounts before. So I was trying to offer her training and things like that, but she seemed to think she knew it all, even though she'd not had training in it. I've
Okay, so
studied
there
for
might be
years.
something there as well about, you know, about how the two of you, sort of the level of competency that you're working at with your job, you know, how much training you have or how much training you need and so on. All right, I'll pause you a second, Heather. There's a chance to come back to many of those things, all of those things. So, Sally, if I turn to you now, and thanks again for your patience while we heard from Heather.
Yeah.
So it's your turn to have some uninterrupted time. So tell me about things from your point of view, what's on your mind this afternoon, but especially, you know, what you'd like to get out of this.
Well, she was going on about my eating. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have to have small regular meals. And she's on about the fact that I'm taking crisps and then purposefully eating them in front of her loudly.
Just if I could just stop the two of you. First of all, Heather, when it's Sally's turn, as it was when it was your turn, I'd please ask you not to interrupt and to let Sally have her go. Sally, while you're making your comments, if you could make your comments directly to me, please, rather than to Heather. And the other thing, I didn't mention it earlier, but I would please ask you to refrain from sort of mimicking each other there. You were just beginning to do it. Right. And again, you know, it is tricky, this. It is a hard thing to have to go through. But if you're mimicking each other, then that can go to a difficult place. So I'd ask you please to try and refrain from that if you can.
Okay. It's been difficult since I first started here, and we've talked about this earlier, didn't we? She thinks the role was created for me through nepotism, you know, the fact I've known James, that we've worked together before, and the fact that the job was created for me.
Everybody knows that it was created for you, for God's
sake. And
sake.
again, if you just pause a second. So for a second time, Heather, for a second time, please. I do need to be able to hear what Sally's got to say. You had the privilege of your uninterrupted time when I asked Sally to wait. So if you could just hold on until she's done. There's plenty of opportunity for the two of you to have a conversation afterwards.
So there we can see some of the frustrations boiling over. We can see how it's quite difficult for them to stay quiet while they're hearing from the other one allegations and some fairly put down comments. The mediator's got to step in just once or twice to make sure they're listening to each other, not talking over, and as well to try and address any behaviour that is disrespectful to the point that it's going to you know, get in the way of the process working. So there's a bit of mimicking going on there and just a couple of aspects of language. So getting through that and allowing a bit of that behaviour, but of course there are boundaries and the mediator needs to apply those boundaries very fairly to the two parties equally. And then we progress to the latter part of stage 4. And this is the part where we're ready to start pulling things together and making everything into a workable agenda.
So, a few things there that you would like to discuss, a few things there you'd like to discuss. Some of them are in common, some of them are individual to you. So from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, there's a need to get a better deal about the state of the working environment. You know, you like it orderly and knowing where you can put your hand on things. Sally, your desk is your desk. It's maybe not managed in the same way as Heather's is, but you
It's
prefer
still
to be
considered tidy, you know.
you prefer to be in charge of how it is yourself.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Regards the job, you know, Heather, I think you're looking for some reassurances that Sally is contributing as much as you are, and you're coming from the place of having, you know, run the department yourself. So that's, you know, your perception is coloured by that. Sally, from your point of view, you want Heather to trust you, to know and to acknowledge that you can actually do the job.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just bring the flip chart in then. And start wherever you want to start, really. So one of the topics you've talked about is around sort of noise, disturbance,
Yeah,
quiet,
talking too
concentration
much.
in the office.
Talking too much and too loud on the phone.
So a need to get a better deal about when you talk, how much you talk. I don't know, it's up to
Just
you.
keeping the volume down a bit, you know.
Okay.
Well, I'd like some conversation from your
I'm not
side. There's
saying
none.
don't have no conversation.
There's no
I'm saying
How about if
keep it a bit quieter.
How about if I put conversation in the office, or just conversation?
Okay, yeah.
You know what it means.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's start with that. Well done. So that's the first one.
So in that part, the mediator is trying to pull together the contributions from the two parties. You can see it's still fairly hostile, it's still quite accusatory. The mediator's job is to very insistently reframe things. So in terms of the two of them sort of finger pointing and making accusations one to the other, the mediator's saying, okay, so there's a need to get a better deal on this, there's a need to get a better deal on that. All the time trying to express empathy equally with the two parties. So the mediator's job in staying impartial is not to sit on the fence and be indifferent to what happens with these two guys, but actually to be empathic towards both of their sets of interests and to do that equally. So the idea is that in the end we get a win-win outcome that means both of them get their interests satisfied, and the way to do that is illustrated to an extent in that short clip, in the way that we see the mediator empathising with both sides, hopefully equally, and if they perceive that that's the case, we can keep them engaged as we move into the next bit, which is about the exploring and working on the issues in our stage 5. So we're moving into, after the agenda has been made, we're moving into the negotiation phase, where we agree where to start our discussions, which we saw a little bit of there. Again, the mediator using a lot of reframing, trying to get the two guys talking directly to each other now, and not talking so much to the mediator, and getting their dialogue going, moving on from the disagreements, and trying to grab the areas of consensus and write those up on the flip chart. So we're going to see now the stage 5, very short section of the stage 5, where we get into the negotiation phase.
Which one would you like to pick now?
Time at desk, I
Yeah.
think that kind of links in.
Time spent at the desk?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that then. So this was raised by you, Heather, when you started. You're
Gosh,
talking
yeah.
about being able to get hold of Sally,
Yeah, well,
and having a sense of, you know, fair shares, but also if the stuff that the two of you are working on together, you've been able to find her and ask her things that you need to know.
yeah, I mean, at the moment, you're constantly getting up and going for breaks. I never know where you are. You know, we've got deadlines
Yeah, but
and
it's
things
not
to
up
meet.
to you to decide when I have my break.
I'm not wanting to decide when you have your breaks. It would just be nice to know where you are. I need work from you sometimes to be able to continue or to put in other reports, and I never know where you are.
Yeah, but you're micromanaging. It's almost like you're
Oh, for God's sake,
indicating when I can
you've
have
always
a break.
been that.
when
I'm not
I can-
dictating.
So let me just pause the two of you. So Sally, you're saying you don't want to be micromanaged by Heather.
No.
Heather, you need things and they're dependent on Sally. You're relying on Sally for certain things to be able to do your job.
Exactly. I'm sorry if you do feel like you're micromanaged. That's not my intention.
No, you shouldn't be managing me at all.
Well, I'm not. But you have to appreciate I've got things to do that I need your work as an input into it, and I can't do it without it. But you're always off on breaks everywhere.
I'm not always off on break.
Let's face it, you're off quite a lot.
Well, there's a reason for that, isn't there? Because
Yeah, 'cause you don't do your work.
I don't feel comfortable. It's freezing in our in our room. It's a horrible place to be, and I will spend as much time somewhere else as possible.
Well, why don't you just get a heater or something? You know, then you haven't got an excuse to be going
I
off
didn't
all the
mean it
time.
like that, and you know it. It was about how you are towards me.
I wouldn't say it's freezing. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. You know, it goes two ways, Sal. It really does.
So Sally, would it be helpful for Heather to know the reasons, the sort of why you're away from your desk?
Well, sometimes I'm doing it because it's just so uncomfortable in the room, and sometimes I'm doing it because I'm going to go for a break and have a snack and drink. Sometimes it's because I'm going to find somebody to have a quick chat with about something.
Okay.
Yeah, about me most of the time.
Because you're saying, Sally, you know, you don't have much interaction in the office, so
No.
actually you go off to get interaction with other
Yeah,
people.
I'd go mad otherwise.
Okay. So Heather, would it be a useful thing for you to tell Sally why it's a problem to you when she is away from the desk? What impact does it have when Sally's not around at her desk?
It's purely, I mean, I'm not bothered when she has her breaks. You know, I'm not. But if I've got things to do, it's just common courtesy just to let me know that you're going off on a break. You know, if I'm in the middle of something and then I look up because I need some input and she's off and then I can't get hold of her. You know, I go to the usual places. I'll go in the kitchen, she's not in there, or I'll go up to sales and she's not. I don't know where she is. I've not got ages to spend running around looking for you when I've got work to do.
But you're telling me I've got to be away from my desk to eat, and now you're telling me I've got to be at my desk
Oh,
to do
don't be
my
so
work.
facetious and childish, honestly.
So Heather, when I hear you use that kind of language, I'm thinking this is what led to the current situation. So really what I'd like you to do, please, is to try and refrain from words like that, especially things like childish. And that way we can be sure that we're moving forwards, you know, and getting away from the point where we did begin today and into a rather better place. Is that going to be all right for you?
Okay.
But just to try and catch that bit of discussion between the two of you, you need to be able to get hold of Sally when you want her and ask her questions. Sally, you like to be away from the desk, stretch or break or go and have a, you know, an interaction with
able to
someone
do
or
that.
have a snack. So what can the two of you do about this?
So there's a short part of the negotiation phase of the mediation process. So this is where they're picking things off the agenda and negotiating them to and fro. And you can see again the mediator's emphasis is on moving the process forwards. It's not about who's right or wrong. We've excluded a couple of things below the line there, so there are a couple of things that we can't really discuss in this forum, which is about capability and training. We're not going to get into arguments about whether people can or can't do their jobs, or whether they need training to do their jobs. And the other one is about the recruitment process. It's something that's clearly a bee in Heather's bonnet, is about how Sally was recruited. But that's happened and we can't address it in mediation. If they want to take that up with whoever is responsible for that process, there needs to be a separate, perhaps more grievance-related approach to that. But we can't address it here. So we're progressing well through the mediation, and we move on from the stage 5 now, and we start getting into the phase of building the agreements. This is our stage 6. So we're looking at all of the offers and concessions and the ideas that they're coming up with and trying to draft this into an agreement. We like to get a written agreement in the session so that they've got something to take away with them on the day. Sometimes there's a need for further sessions, often there isn't. But what we like to also get in is a fallback arrangement. So in case when they've made an agreement, in case that agreement fails or comes off the rails, we've got some kind of a fallback, a safety net, to make sure that we don't go back to where we started. So there'll be a need to have some kind of a contingency plan or safety net, a bit like a prenuptial agreement, so that we're, you know, we've still got the general progress is in a forwards direction and not a backwards direction. Occasionally, if we don't reach an agreement, there might be a need for alternative courses of action, and sometimes it's okay. We've tried mediation, we've discovered that the main points of contention are perhaps not addressable this way, or perhaps there are other people that need to be involved, or perhaps there are other extraneous factors that mean that the mediation can't be successful at this time. And we're very positive about the use of mediation here at UK Mediation, and we often, you know, we say give it a go. And we get more surprise successes than surprise failures, I have to say. Cases where people go, nah, I don't think it's going to work. We give it a go. One of our panel mediators will go out and work their magic, and sometimes we get great results where we never thought we would. Assuming we get to the point of an agreement, we're going to close the session down. We thank the participants. They have an agreement that they sign on the day, just as a symbolic agreement to the form of words that we get onto the agreement document. There's no binding nature of the agreements that are reached in this kind of mediation, and it's a good faith agreement which requires that they make their best efforts to make it happen. They go away with that agreement, they see if they can put that into action, usually very successful, and we agree whether there's a follow-up period, whether that's appropriate and whether that's something that they want to do. So we follow up briefly after usually about 4 or 5 weeks, see how they've got on, if there's any need for any further support. So there's a very, very quick whistle-stop tour through the mediation model as related to Sally and Heather's dispute. Meeting them separately, getting them together for a face-to-face meeting, an agenda, some negotiation, making it into an agreement, and then closing the thing down and following up. Feels like I did all of that on one breath. So when we tried to run the live event earlier, we got some questions already up front. A question, not surprisingly at the moment, with the COVID-19 shutdown, lockdown, people saying, can we apply this model to online mediation? Absolutely yes. We have been absolutely overwhelmed with online mediations in the last few weeks since the lockdown. So we're perfectly set up to run online mediations. Now, to an extent, you can't get the same richness of communication in online as you can in face-to-face. You've not got the little paralinguistic cues, the little micro gestures, the little aspects of non-verbal communication that you get when you're face-to-face. You're missing out on that. But what I am finding is that there are a lot of cases where people are coming forward and saying, well, we would never have done face-to-face mediation, but now there's this sort of a tendency towards online working, we're going to give it a go. So we use Zoom, we set up Zoom meetings, and we're getting cases that probably wouldn't have been referred if the only option was doing face-to-face. But now it's going to be online. People are going, yeah, we'll do that instead. It feels a bit less challenging just to be on the other end of a webcam than it is to be within physical proximity to somebody that you've got a really big bust-up with. And it's not just workplace disputes where this is the case. We're doing a lot of work with disputes within families, disputes within boards of directors and committees, and some financial disputes as well. A lot of busy work online. I seem to, our mediators seem to be spending their working day looking down a webcam at the moment. So yes to online. And then just one more question that's come in as well, which is, do you think that this is is this solvable just in one session? Most of our cases we complete in a single day and one session. There is occasionally a need to re-meet, to come back again. Sometimes it's pure practicalities, that they haven't got enough time on the day or that we don't get far enough through it. Other times there's so much to talk about, or the relationship aspects of the dispute are so important that they want to give it more than just one shot. So there's just a couple of questions from earlier. So what I'm going to do now is to start to wind down a little bit and just talk about a couple of our other online webinars. And guess what? One of our webinars is talking about online mediation in action. So we've rejigged our webinar timetable. We generally plan them 12 months in advance. We've rejigged it now with what's been going on. So we are going to show you how online mediation works. I have got an enactment of an online mediation based on a dispute between two colleagues again. And you'll see how the mediator interacts separately and then jointly with them. So just imagine translating that model that we've been talking about in these 40 minutes into a Zoom meeting and how that would work. So you'll see exactly how online mediation works. Very topical and in-depth look, transferred to a virtual platform. And again, I'm the mediator on that, so if you're not already sick of the sound of my voice. And then if this is all whetting your appetite to be a mediator yourself, we're going to talk about becoming a workplace mediator on Friday 19th of June. How to become a mediator, how to build your reputation and grow your experience and establish your credibility. And I think what I'm going to do with that, we've got a little bit of time, is to build in some aspects of online mediation in there as well, of course, given that we have such now a preponderance of online cases. So Friday 19th of June, would be great if you could join us. And then apart from the practicalities of mediation, there's a little bit about the theory. So on 24th of July, we're going to be presenting the UK mediation model of mediation. So this is the model that's arisen from my own doctoral work and from 21 years of experience on the back of being a psychotherapist for 11 years. We've really looked quite deeply in UK mediation at the psychology of conflict. We lift the lid on mediation, looking at the anatomy and psychology of what's going on when we get into conflict, why we get stuck there, and how does mediation work. So we'd be delighted if you could join us for that one as well on Friday 24th of July. So that brings us to a close. So again, just to come back to where I came in, we see if we can sort out the gremlins in time for our next live webinar. This was intended to be live, but we couldn't quite get YouTube to get on board with us earlier on. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Do keep in touch. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. Have a look at our LinkedIn page. And you can like and subscribe to our Facebook as well. So there we have it. This is our Workplace Mediation online showcase. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the questions that came earlier. And we look forward to seeing you on the online mediation showcase in just a few weeks. I'm Dr. Mike Talbot. It's been a great pleasure. Talk to you soon.